The darkest Godzilla iceberg. If you're like me and you want to know everything about Godzilla and the franchise, then this iceberg is for you. If you're unfamiliar with the iceberg concept, you basically start at the top, which is all common knowledge, and you work your way downwards. And as you work your way downwards, things get more dark, obscure, and strange. Until eventually you hit the bottom and things go completely crazy. So you are not going to want to miss any of this. So let's start from the very top with Tier 1. Different Godzilla eras. There are many different versions of Godzilla, especially in the lore, but this is the easiest way to explain it, to split it into eras/series. You have the Showa era/series, which is 1954. You then have the Heisei era, which is 1975 to the early 90s, then the Millennium era from 1994 to 2004, moving into where we are now, which is the Reiwa era. In putting that as our first entry, it makes things a lot easier to understand as time goes on, because things do get absolutely crazy. The Godzilla series. The Godzilla series was based after the 1998 film Godzilla. The cartoon follows directly after the events of 1998, and it focuses on an egg which hatches and becomes the new Godzilla. Godzilla can fly. Whenever you think of the new Godzilla incarnations, you think he's a big hulking beast with this atomic breath. There is no way he can fly. But that's actually incorrect, because in previous incarnations, Godzilla could actually fly using his atomic breath. We see him use this in the 1971 movie, and it does look rather comical. He's seen flying in various other movies as well, but I wouldn't hold your atomic breath to see him fly anytime in the future. Jet Jaguar. Jet Jaguar is a heroic robot who first appeared in the 1973 Godzilla film Godzilla vs. Megalon. He basically teams up and becomes allies with Godzilla throughout the franchise, although there are iterations where he does actually fight Godzilla. Jet Jaguar is also a reserve member of the Global Defense Force, heroically protecting humanity whenever it is threatened by monstrous threats. The Godzilla tail slide. This is the infamous scene of Godzilla sliding along on his tail to dropkick Megalon, who is being held by Jet Jaguar. The tail slide was one of the most difficult movie stunts of all time. Godzilla should have definitely won an Oscar just for that. Godzilla films use suitmation. Suitmation is a term originally used in Japan for special effects techniques to portray a giant monster using an actor in a monster suit. In nearly all eras of Godzilla, suitmation was used. In any case, the suits were very, very grueling, and people could only stay inside them for a mere minute or so before becoming fatigued. An oxygen hose was actually attached to Godzilla's tail in Godzilla 2000, so the actor could physically breathe in the suit. Godzilla 1978. Godzilla is an American animated monster television series produced by Hanna-Barbera.
Breathing fire, his head in the sky. Godzilla, 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 and Godzuki.
The series aired in 1978 and lasted until 1981. Basically, this show follows a group of kids around, and along for the ride is Godzuki, who is the cowardly nephew of Godzilla, who they use to actually call Godzilla to attack other giant monsters. It's basically like Scooby-Doo but with Godzilla, and later on we will actually be talking about Godzilla in Scooby-Doo. The Godzilla Pipeworks Trilogy. The Pipeworks Godzilla Trilogy is a 3D fighting game series developed by Pipeworks.
Destroy all monsters.
It features Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, which is 2002, Godzilla Save the Earth, 2004, and Godzilla Unleashed, 2007. Gameplay consists of an array of light and heavy attacks that can be altered with input from directional buttons, as well as ranged attacks that consume energy. There were plans for a fourth game, but Atari's license expired before development could begin. The Monsterverse. The Monsterverse is an American multimedia franchise and shared fictional universe featuring Godzilla, King Kong, and other monster characters. Basically, it's like a massive collaboration all under one roof and one license, which Godzilla has been part of ever since 2014. Zone Fighters. Zone Fighters was a 1973 Japanese kaiju series which featured Godzilla, Gigan, King Ghidorah, and many lists of other characters which were placed in the Showa canon. The show featured the Zone family who would have to stop terror beasts, and Godzilla occasionally helped the Zone fighters battle them. NTV cancelled the series after 26 episodes due to poor ratings, leaving the story's central conflict unresolved. The Oxygen Destroyer. This was a weapon of mass destruction used to kill Godzilla in the 1954 Godzilla film Godzilla. While the Oxygen Destroyer made its first major appearance in the 1954 film, it has made several appearances in numerous other Godzilla films after its initial appearance. Tier 2. Heading below the water of the iceberg. In this tier, we start to see things take a weird twist to the bizarre and strange. And it only gets worse as time goes on. Scaly Turtle. Skelly Turtle has become hugely popular within the fandom. Skelly Turtle made a very short appearance on Mothra vs. Gorilla, lasting only about 38 seconds on the screen and in the background. It was found on the Infant Island, which had a lot of radiation and lifeless skeletons. None of the characters ever directly interact with it or notice it, but it does seem to be alive and its head bobs from side to side. Despite this, it makes several appearances in other Godzilla films whilst also spanning a toy line and ornaments. People do like that Skelly Turtle. Zilla. Zilla is a fictional monster or kaiju which first appeared in Godzilla 1998, released by TriStar Pictures. It was initially created as a reimagining of Godzilla, but was later rebranded as a separate character. Dogzilla. Dogzilla is a children's picture book created by Dave Pickett that parodies Godzilla with a cardigan Welsh corgi. Published in 1993, the book is a sequel to Cat Kong, which spoofs King Kong. Gojira.
It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Still, we should run like it is Godzilla!
Though it isn't.
Godzilla's Japanese name Gojira is a combination of gorira, which is gorilla, and kajira, which is whale. Since Godzilla came from Japan, he is essentially, well not literally, a gorilla whale. The rebirth of Mothra. Mothra is a giant moth goddess and the most common reoccurring monster in the Godzilla series besides from Godzilla himself. Unlike most other monsters in the series, Mothra is always on the side of good. She has also appeared in every era of Godzilla films along with every Mechagodzilla, Rodan and King Ghidorah. Mothra is depicted as an immortal deity and in most films, and despite having died multiple times, she's always reborn through her eggs, which she lays before battle or due to old age. Mothra has protected the planet many times from monsters like King Ghidorah and sometimes even put in conflict with Godzilla, which is something we'll talk about later. Godzilla's appearance in Scooby-Doo. In the show Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, Godzilla arrives with his daughter, who's one of the new students at Miss Grimwald's finishing school for ghouls, the sight of which scare off Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. This is one thing I thought I'd never say, that Godzilla is indeed canon to Scooby-Doo. Side note to this, in actual fact, in the Godzilla movies, Godzilla never had a daughter. In fact, female monsters are few and far between. But it is canon that he is a father though, and that's something we'll talk about later. King Kong vs. Godzilla alternate ending. In the 1962 film King Kong vs. Godzilla, everyone has said there's been two alternate versions, one for the US and one for the Japanese. The US version obviously showing Kong the victor, and the Japanese version obviously showing Godzilla the victor. Ironically enough, while the US version is very different from the Japanese original, the endings are essentially the same. Despite the popular but erroneous story that Godzilla winning the Japanese version, in both versions of the fight, Kong ends emerging from the ocean and swimming home. Yet somehow this urban legend that there were two endings preserved for decades, probably because there was no internet back then. Marvel's Godzilla. Godzilla King of the Monsters is an American comic book series published by Marvel Comics, running for 24 issues from 1977 to 1979, and the series starred Godzilla. The plot is basically Godzilla being confronted by S.H.I.E.L.D., where you have Stark Industries, Nick Fury, all them lot trying to contain Godzilla. And in the end, Rob is able to persuade Godzilla to spare the city and return to the sea. NES Godzilla Creepypasta. The NES Godzilla Creepypasta is a very long pasta about, well, just that, the NES Godzilla Creepypasta. It's known for both its length and for being extremely image heavy. It's so long, in fact, it had to be split into sub-pages. The story is centered around a possessed Godzilla Monster of Monsters game cartridge. It also introduces a large array of original enemy monsters such as Red, the story's main antagonist, who is eventually revealed to have a deep personal connection with the protagonist. Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex. Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex is a 3D animated Godzilla short film written and directed by Takayaya Unaishi. Apologies if I butchered that name. Which he submitted the Gemstones Godzilla contest, winning the chance to work with one of its directors in an official capacity. It was screened during Godzilla Fest in 2022 and subsequently released on YouTube at that same year. Wikizilla. Wikizilla is a fan site dedicated to everything Godzilla. It's basically like Wikipedia, but for Godzilla. Part of this video would not be possible without that information they provide. Tier 3. Heading below the iceberg. The further down we go, the more bizarre things get, and this tier is no exception, as you'll find out. Godzilla was originally an octopus. Setting on Godzilla's look was a process, and one of the early designs of the King of Monsters in 1954 was actually a giant octopus, before they eventually settled on the dinosaur-esque look. Imagine what the franchise would look like if it was a giant octopus. Mini-Illa is adopted. Mini-Illa is an infant member of Godzilla's species. In both the Showa and Millennium series, it is is never stated if Godzilla is Minilla's biological father, or if he simply adopted him. However, in the 1998 information book, the official Godzilla Compendium, the official language website both state that the Minilla was adopted by Godzilla in Son of Godzilla. The Godzilla 98 sequel. The 1998 film Godzilla actually had plans to have a sequel. This was going to be set in Australia, where we'd see Godzilla rampaging around Sydney and causing lots of destruction throughout the country. There was even a script written for this. Alas, it was eventually scrapped because of the poor ratings on Godzilla. Mecha King Ghidorah. Not to be confused with Mecha Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah is a cybernetic kaiju who first appeared in the 1991 Godzilla film Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Despite its name, Mecha King Ghidorah is not fully mechanical, but a cyborg. It was built in the year 2204 around the comatose body of King Ghidorah after it was defeated by Godzilla in 1992. Mecha King Ghidorah was sent back to 1992 to battle Godzilla in Tokyo before he could destroy Japan, and he succeeded in halting his rampage and then dumped him in the ocean, though he was destroyed in the battle. But despite this, in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, the remains of Mecha King Ghidorah's mechanical middle head was salvaged by G-Force, who reverse engineered its technology in order to build Mechagodzilla. Malfunction in suits. As I spoke of earlier, some of the original Godzilla films, the actors were wearing suits to portray the characters and monsters. These suits, however, would regularly malfunction and cause extreme injuries in some cases, with some almost resulting in deaths. Hayao Nakajima had all kinds of dangerous experiences, such as when he was playing Godzilla, he was accidentally set on fire during a military attack sequence. While playing the title monster in Rodan's fighter jet battle scene, the wires holding him aloft snapped and dumped him into the river, where he almost drowned. And perhaps one of the worst, the burning Godzilla suit. The actor was repeatedly got electrocuted by the suit during water scenes, and the smoke generated by the suit sometimes caused him to pass out. And there's several instances of near-death experiences in the big pool when they were filming Godzilla and Kong. Just another day in the office for these actors. Shin Godzilla's first form. Shin Godzilla is unique amongst other Godzilla incarnations in the fact that he is a completely new species spawned by nuclear waste dumping. Shin Godzilla was mutated by feeding on nuclear waste dumped in the Tokyo Bay in the 1950s, which gave him the unusual ability to mutate its own DNA and rapidly evolve into new situations. As he evolves through these various forms, you can see a massive change in the aesthetic. All these forms are visible throughout the film, except the first form, which goes unseen in the film, aside from its tail and part of its back. Space Godzilla. Space Godzilla is a crystalline Godzilla clone kaiju who first appeared in the 1994 Godzilla film Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Boasting an array of psychic powers and energy attacks, along with the ability to form and use crystals in various ways, Space Godzilla is a challenging opponent. He was spawned by some of Godzilla's cells, which were cast into outer space, and then he made his way to Earth with the goal of conquering the planet and eliminating his Earth counterpart. It is safe to say he is quite evil. Space Godzilla has been featured prominently in other Godzilla media. Muscle Mothra. Now, I believe this just to be some type of meme or comedy sketch, but I believe Muscle Mothra is a take on the original Mothra and portrays her in much of a muscle form, able to take down any type of monster or kaiju. I couldn't find too much information on this when researching, but I believe it originated from a comic. But if you know anything about this, please let me know in the comments below, because it is extremely bizarre. Tier 4. Approaching the bottom of the iceberg. At this point, all the darkest things start to come out, and only the true hardened Godzilla fan will have heard of most of this stuff. Mothzilla. Mothzilla is a parody of the Japanese monsters Mothra and Godzilla. It was featured in The Beast with a Billion Backs in Futurama, where it partially ate Frybender, Leia, Zoidberg, and Amy's uniforms.
Mothzilla got into the ship's closet, though. Oh, all right.
To the garment district!
Mothra is also the term people use to ship Godzilla and Mothra. Godzilla eating cows. In the original 1954 Godzilla, it is shown in a storyboard that Godzilla actually eats cows. This was never filmed or featured in the final release because they thought the storyboards were actually too graphic to show. God's Godzilla. God's Godzilla was authored and submitted in 1979 as one of many proposals to revive the Godzilla series. The plot revolves around conscious-based alien life forms arriving on Earth, reviving a newly discovered Godzilla, and dub him the malevolent god of destruction. The plot gets weirder and weirder as Godzilla destroys cities with tsunamis, and the aliens start destroying cities with the spaceships. An image of humanity's future is projected upon the sky above Giza, Egypt, depicting their horrified, mutated descendants. The film went unproduced for unspecified reasons, probably because he was batshit crazy, with the return of Godzilla ultimately being created instead, kicking off the Heisei era of films. Godzilla animatronics. Throughout the course of the franchise, Godzilla traditionally used suitmation techniques for their special effects, but this wasn't always the case, and some pretty badass animatronics were actually built, ranging in various scales and sizes. We have the one built in Godzilla 84, which was absolutely massive and was fully articulated. They created half an animatronic for the 1998 Godzilla, and we'd recently seen an unused animatronic for Shin Godzilla. The reason this was unused is because apparently it looked janky when it moved. Humanoid monsters on Shin Godzilla's tail. During the film Shin Godzilla, after he evolves into his fifth form, he's eventually frozen, with small humanoid creatures with Godzilla's teeth and dorsal plates can be seen fishing in from his tail, suggesting that he was in the process of evolving into an army of human-like forms capable of combating humanity. As if that film wasn't creepy and scary enough. Ghost Godzilla. Ghost Godzilla was an unused kaiju who was considered for inclusion in various proposals for the 7th and final Heisei Godzilla film. It is the restless spirit of the original Godzilla who was killed by the Oxygen Destroyer in 1954. He was intended to be Godzilla's last opponent in the final film of the Heisei series. Ghost Godzilla would have possessed little Godzilla in one draft of the film, causing him to grow from the inside out into a form resembling the 1954 Godzilla. I did say these ones were going to be crazy in this tier. Mothra is stronger than Godzilla. Mothra has become one of Godzilla's most challenging opponents, having achieved the greatest success rate of all monsters against him in battle and continuously bests him. It should be mentioned, however, that Mothra has never beaten Godzilla alone in her Imago form. Rainbow Mothra caught on fire. Mothra Leo, or Rainbow Mothra, is a giant divine moth kaiju who first appeared in the 1996 Toho film Rebirth of Mothra. During the filming of Rebirth of Mothra 3, they created 2 new Rainbow Mothra props, which were constructed to replace the previous ones. The thinner they used to create the primitive Mothra's silk ignited during filming and set the Rainbow Mothra prop on fire, requiring the filmmakers to retrieve a new prop and film the scene again with it. Tokyo 1960. Tokyo 1960 is considered to be a lost film. It was basically the Filipino version of the Godzilla movie. It was claimed to be shot in Tokyo, Japan, but it was really shot in Melania. As is considered a lost film, it is still unknown if the movie is a redub or a re-edit of the original Godzilla movie, Gojira. Tier 5. The Abyss. With this now completely below the iceberg, expect to have some more obscure facts and creepy things about Godzilla. Sperm Godzilla. Sperm Godzilla was from a Japanese comic called The Godzilla Comic Raids Again. It has an analogy of stories, one of which seems to have the scientists cloning Godzilla from organic matter they find, resulting in a Godzilla clone from cancer cells, one from white blood cells, and the other from sperm cells. To the best of my knowledge, it has not been translated into English anywhere on the internet. Mech Godzilla referenced in Sonic Adventure. One of my favourite games as a kid was Sonic Adventure, and in Sonic Adventure you actually see a Mecha Sonic, but it's clearly a Mecha Godzilla Sonic reference. Look at him closely, it's clearly a reference to him. They have the same torso, eyes, missile fingers, knee pads, and the eyes. He has one Cyclop orange eye and chainsaws instead of quills, and it's silver, not dark grey. Evidently, this is a huge nod to Mecha Godzilla. The first Godzilla toy was a toy gun. When you think of Godzilla toys, you think of the board games, perhaps the figures you would have, all the monsters, but the first Godzilla toy ever released was actually a Godzilla toy gun. It was sold in Japan in 1955 to coincide with the release of the Godzilla Raids Again, King Godzilla. King Godzilla is a fusion-enhanced Godzilla clone kaiju created by the mad scientist Mad Oniyama in the King of the Monsters manga series. His initial form is a clone of Godzilla, so visually it's identical to his original counterpart, but he's a base of Chimera, King Ghidorah, and Batra. Instead of arms, he has King Ghidorah's left and right necks and heads. He possesses Godzilla's body, but his legs are from King Ghidorah. Finally, he has Batra's wings and brain. King Godzilla's life is a pure clone of Godzilla grown from cells gathered during Godzilla's fight against Neo Gigan. King Godzilla can use atomic breath identical to that of Godzilla, gravity beams, Neo Bellante sap jet, has immense physical strength, he can fly, and increased regeneration. Godzilla's family. In every era, there's a different iteration of what happened to Godzilla's parents. In the 1954 Godzilla, his habitat was completely destroyed by a hydrogen bomb test, and that also killed his parents. But in the Monsterverse adaptation, the Titanus gojira species managed to survive various extinction events by escaping into the hollow earth and consuming the radiation. Godzilla Kingdom. This is an extremely obscure show. It's a Japanese 3D animated information series produced by Toho that aired from October the 1st, 1996 until August the 15th in 1997. The plot focuses on a woman only known by the mononym Doctor and her friend kaiju companion Megabyte, which analyze the data of Godzilla and other monsters to outline their abilities and secrets. It had over 224 episodes in total and featured nearly every monster in the Godzilla franchise, including Titanosaurus. Fake Godzilla. Fake Godzilla is a robot Godzilla imposter that first appeared in the 1974 Godzilla film Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. When it first emerged from Mount Fuji, Mechagodzilla wore a pseudo-reptilian skin that allowed it to almost seamlessly resemble Godzilla. This disguise, however, was damaged in the battle and eventually completely removed in the battle with Godzilla himself. Mechagodzilla himself has frequently worn the fake disguise in non-film media such as video games and comics. And there's also a theory that the Godzilla we see in Godzilla vs. Kong is actually the fake Godzilla. Mothra's origins. Mothra's origins have somewhat been varied from film to film, but she always is portrayed as a benevolent and ancient creature that possesses some level of divinity. For example, in Godzilla vs. Mothra, it explains that Mothra was the guardian of an ancient world protecting all life on Earth from threats. And in Rebirth of Mothra, it is established that Mothra is the last living member of an ancient race of giant guardian moths. In Giant Monsters All Out Attack, Mothra's origins receives a massive alteration, where she is now the guardian/goddess of the sea, and in ancient times her fellow guardians Baragon and King Ghidorah were slain by Japanese warriors. And in the Monsterverse, she is still the same old benevolent goddess, but her origins do not lie on Infant Island like the previous ones, but rather in China Yun's rainforest. Tier 6. The very abyss and bottom of the iceberg. This is the final tier with some of the strangest, bizarrest, creepiest things you'll ever hear about Godzilla. The evil Gigan suit creepypasta. There's a creepypasta on the internet about a haunted Gigan final suit, where in 2004, after they finished filming GFW, the Gigan suit suddenly started moving on its own. Now, initially this was just a rumour after the filming, but it's developed into a whole host of creepypastas on the internet. Just a quick Google and you'll be able to find some of them. Whether the suit did actually move on its own or not is unknown. Lucky Dragon 5. Now, this is more of a horror story of the origins of Godzilla than anything else. Lucky Dragon 5 was a fishing boat back in the early 1950s when the Americans were testing their atomic bomb. The Americans give warning around the area that they were going to test the atomic bomb, but everything went drastically wrong. The Lucky Dragon 5 boat set out for normal outside of the predicted blast zone. On March the 1st, 1954, the Americans detonated their nuclear test near the Marshall Islands. The crew on the deck of the boat watched the west light up like a sunset. The boat was undamaged, but they felt the shockwave from the blast. However, several hours later, white radioactive dust made up of radioactive particles fell on the ship. And not to mention all the aquatic wildlife and fish that were in the area. They evacuated the area with the fish they had caught that day. These men and all the fish they had with them were highly irradiated. The announcement of this news came as a large surprise to the Americans, as they had persistently kept the nuclear experiment secret. All the fish they also caught had to be thrown away due to high levels of radiation. It is said that this event sparked the creation of the Godzilla series, as Godzilla came out a few years after this event and was inspired by radioactive materials/bombs being dropped in the ocean. That was pretty heavy, so let's perk ourselves up. Monster Godzilla Warrior. This is a Godzilla which is portrayed as a warrior and from an alternate universe/dimension. Godzilla is king of the kaiju army and consists of all other people fighting basically Earth in his reality because they want to take over their kingdom. In this universe, Godzilla suits up in his armor and fights the president of Japan, who's kind of like a kaiju himself at this stage, who's protected by all other kaiju which Godzilla fights and defeats. The fact that you see Godzilla in a humanoid form is just absolutely crazy. Godzilla's genitalia. In the 1998 film Zilla, which everybody absolutely loves, it's revealed in the film's commentary that Patrick Tatolis had actually put female genitalia on Zilla. Yes, it was physically sculpted onto the model, although it's very difficult to see in the film. Now, I don't know why you'd do this, why you'd even need to do this, let alone even mention it, but now you are blessed with that piece of information. Enjoy. King Kong in Jet Jaguar's suit. When Godzilla vs. Megalon was being marketed in Germany, it was claimed that King Kong was going to be in the final release. This is because the German version marketed Jet Jaguar under the name King Kong, which was a mistake. This led people to believe that King Kong was actually in the movie as Jet Jaguar, so basically King Kong in a Jet Jaguar suit. This is completely false, as it never happened, although the marketing did say that Jet Jaguar was King Kong. They just used King Kong's name rather than Jet Jaguar. This led people to obviously believe that King Kong was in the suit. They never once say that in the movie. They just literally say that King Kong is in there instead of Jet Jaguar, but Jet Jaguar is displayed on screen, so it confused a lot of people. Biollante King Ghidorah hybrid. In the Godzilla comic, Godzilla reads again, Ghidorah is flying through space going to attack Earth, where they come into contact with Biollante, who's living in space debris around the planet. The two kaiju have a massive fight where Biollante absorbs King Ghidorah's powers. Biollante then transforms himself into a Biollante King Ghidorah hybrid and continues to fight King Ghidorah. Even though Biollante is now super powerful, King Ghidorah still beats him. Warning from G. This is from the Godzilla comic, where a special martial artist learns a killing technique which can actually kill Godzilla. I mean, you must be completely insane to go toe-to-toe with Godzilla, but this is what the guy actually does, and guess what? It works. He actually kills Godzilla with it, but at the cost of his own life. And he actually has a wife and a kid and leaves his wife a widow. But this isn't the end of this crazy story, because it just gets wackier and wackier. Once the kid is born, it is revealed that Godzilla's essence is now inside this kid. Essentially, this kid is Super Godzilla in human form. And because it's obviously Godzilla's soul inside this kid, he absolutely hates humans and wants revenge on every human. So he decides to go on a mass killing spree, starting with his original mother by killing her with a rock. It's an absolutely wild ride, and I'd recommend checking it out. Godzilla Doom Island. Now, this sounds more like an original Shadows Theory channel, but I tell you it's not. It's basically an original 90s toy line with Godzilla in basic power armor, and he lives on an island infested with dinosaurs, where he's fighting against them. T-Rexes, Velociraptors, you name it, Godzilla's fighting it in his power armor. Unfortunately, only a handful of these figures were ever released. They're extremely rare. Godzilla vs. the Devil. Godzilla vs. the Devil was a supposed late 1970s Godzilla film proposal, first reported in 1978. The project's existence has been debated among Western Godzilla fans due to part of the Godzilla creator Tomiyasu Tanaku's denial of it in 1980s, although it did feature in Fangoria from 1979, saying it was going to be released for that year, and it was advertised at least once more in 1981 issues of the famous Monsters of Finland. As it is barely any information on what the plot would be, we could only assume it would be very much like when Godzilla goes to hell and battles the devil there, which is obviously the three-headed devil, King Ghidorah. So we could assume that Godzilla's going to hell and fighting the devil, which is obviously three-headed devil, King Ghidorah. Godzilla gets divorced. In Godzilla Jokes and Riddles coloring book, it depicts Godzilla actually being married and is famous for some of his jokes, such as, what is Godzilla's wife's name? Where does Godzilla go surfing? But one of these jokes is more famous than the rest. Why did Godzilla get a divorce? Implying that Godzilla was actually married. A space Godzilla. Now, I know what you're thinking, we covered a space Godzilla earlier. Well, this is a different one which never made it to the screen. It was pitched and not even considered in the 1970s. The plot is as follows. Godzilla's dying of diabetes. God knows how he got diabetes, but he's dying of it. And in order to try and save him, they dissect him to try and communicate with his brain. They were actually able to communicate it and discover that Godzilla is actually a sentient species named Roseanne. And Roseanne is from a Godzilla space planet, and she's actually pregnant. The scientists, upon learning this, decide to turn Godzilla into a space rocket and launch him into space with the unborn baby still inside, who at this stage is still suffering from diabetes. The Godzilla spaceship eventually finds its way to the Godzilla planet, where they're reunited with Rosanna's husband, who is now under attack by an alien space race. Kanan, who's the husband space Godzilla, and his now child, who's grown up to a massive Godzilla, battled the space aliens and saved the day. This to me sounds like a film which we should have definitely have seen, and I for one would pay money to see it, because it sounds absolutely fascinating. If you made it to the end of the video, If you're watching this, you've watched the entirety of this video, and I thank you so much for doing so. Please hit that like button if you have, it really does help me out, and subscribe for all other Godzilla and Jurassic Park related content. This is something I never really do in regards to Godzilla. It's the first Godzilla piece of content on the channel, so if you did like it, let me know in the comments and I will make more. I'd like to thank my YouTube members as always for supporting, guys. Thank you very much, and if you want to see more of this, let me know in the comments. See you guys later. Bye bye now.